What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka Toe Tag and Tambo, back for another edition of the PrizePicks DraftKings show. This time for week 6, and I'm back with my main man, of course, JT Hayes. JT, what's going on this fine Thursday evening?
And I'm excited about this week. We got a smaller slate with the bye weeks starting to take effect. Of course, we've got another London game, a very, very exciting Thursday night game that's playing out as we record, and so much data that we have now that we didn't have the last few weeks. A lot of ways to parse it, and it's gonna be a good week. I feel confident about this week. Had a decent week last week. Could have been a little bit better, but the season rolls on, and now we're starting to get into a little bit of a groove here of which players are getting opportunity bonuses just due to injury, and some really, really interesting spots this week. Of course, it's Thursday. A lot of interesting injury spots, including the Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. Not sure what's going on with them. So we'll get into all that. But another interesting week in the NFL coming up.
Yeah, I love that you already talked about what I was thinking right out of the gate is, down to 10 games. We got bye weeks starting. Usually it's lucky 7, but I'm feeling good about number 6. We're in week 6 here. Like you said, a little bit more information. Lots to go off of. And the 10 game is kind of, I talk to my daughter sometimes about Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold, just right. That's kind of how I feel about this week because 10 games is just the perfect number. It's not too little. It's not too many. It's just the right amount right there in the middle. And there's still a lot you can take away from it. Still plenty of ways to get unique. We'll get to that later. But as always, if you guys don't know the format, we're going to go through our top 2 PrizePicks plays each. We'll go through that, talk about them. JT's coming off a 2-2 week. I don't have that honor yet. I got a lot of 1-1s, but he's got 2 winners last week. He's done it before. It's not his first time, but I know that. But I'll just say that. And then we're going to get into the DraftKings picks later on. Some carry over, some have some overlap, but I do think there's some different ways to go about it. We had some pretty good stacks last week. Talking DraftKings picks, you had Devontae Adams. I had Burrow. I had Brady. We had a lot of stuff go right. I had Cook, which turned out to be Madison. There was just a lot of good picks in there, so stick around for that. But JT Hayes, before we get into the PrizePicks, let the people know what's going on over at that site and any of the promos you can think of that we can talk about here.
Yeah, the PrizePicks promo is still going on, the Mayo Media Network promo. You pick 5 PrizePick plays every week. Now, remember, it could be Thursday, it could be Sunday, it cannot be Monday night because they calculate these at the end of the day on Sunday. Make your total wager $7.11. And there's some enormous prizes at the end of the season. Top prize, $3,000 in site credit. Second place, $1,500. And there's also weekly bonuses. If you get all 5 picks correct every week or on any given week, then you'll get a bonus that week. And like you said, last week, I was right on the picks. I got the Joe Burrow. I got the Devontae Adams. And there's a number of shows every day on the Mayo Media Network here that will give you a sampling of different picks that you can take to basically take some weight off your shoulders to help you with the decisions. You just put in that wager for $7.11, make your 5 picks, and you get a leg up on the competition.
Yeah, I love it. Like you said, 7-11. To see that 7 just keeps coming up, but we're week 6. We like this number, so we're going to go with it. Starting off with PrizePicks, you can roll first this week. Tell me what you've got for PrizePicks, your 2 favorite plays of the week.
You know, it's interesting that no one plays Taylor Heineke. A couple of weeks ago, I had him in the game against the Atlanta Falcons. I got him at like 6% ownership. Of course, he's gaining a little bit of steam. Still only looks like 8% ownership on DraftKings in what is the highest total of the week. And on PrizePicks, his over-under on passing yards is 263.5 passing yards. I don't believe that there's a quarterback yet that hasn't thrown for 300 yards against the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to be on the road in Washington. I know what your pick is going to be, and I love that as well. And I was tempted. I said, man, I want to take this one, but you got yours in first. But I like Taylor Heineke. I like the weapons here. I like this game a lot. I mean, I think he's going to come in, segueing from PrizePicks, he's going to come in very under-owned for the opportunity here, but I do think he smashes that over on 263.5 yards. And then one that I still feel pretty confident in, and I think this is a play on DraftKings that's going to be pretty low owned too, just because of the low total in the game. But Brandon Cooks in these better matchups has been money this season. He's coming off of 2 down games. Those games against Buffalo, who's a great defense, probably the best defense in the NFL so far this season, and against New England, who always look to take away the opposition's number one target, which on the Houston Texans, there's absolutely no question it's Brandon Cooks. His over-under on receiving yards set at just 62.5. And we saw Davis Mills got after it last week. He actually had a pretty decent game. If you looked at the points per dollar on the quarterbacks on DraftKings, Davis Mills was either the top or at least in the top 3 in terms of points per dollar. So I have some confidence that he is going to be able to get Brandon Cooks the ball against this Indianapolis Colts secondary that almost has nobody left. I mean, I gave a thought to running out there, getting a flight to Indianapolis and taking a 40 run to see if maybe I could suit up instead of Rock Ya-Sin. I don't think it's going to happen. Actually, I know it's not going to happen. But I like Brandon Cooks in the over here to go along with my Taylor Heineke pick. I love the one pick that I know of you. I can't remember the second one, but I'm excited to I'm going to run all 4 of these this week. That's how much confidence I have in your picks as well.
I'm pretty sure it's going to be a 2-0 week. I love so many things that you just said there. Sometimes I'll disagree, but not this time, especially the Heineke. The best part you said, though, and it'll come in handy later when we get into the DraftKings section, but over 300 yards for every quarterback. And like you said, 263 is just a gift in that sense, as long as he stays in the game healthy, because that's going to matter. The bonuses matter over on DraftKings. So I even love that on PrizePicks. It will definitely tie in with my first pick here. But then for your second pick, too, it just makes so much sense. And it'll, again, tie in later on. I think there's some plays at running back and wide receiver that you could run back and utilize Cooks in a secondary stack in your daily fantasy lineups this week. So for me, you've hinted at it a couple times. It's Terry McLaurin. It's Scary Terry, F1 McLaurin, whatever you want to call him. I think he's just a great play this week. And the over on PrizePicks is 77.5 yards. Feel great about this one. Gonna need him in this spot against Kansas City. If you don't know, now you know. It's a 55-point total. It's the highest total on the slate. I think it's gonna be a popular game, but when you're gonna put out a yardage total like this, for me, I'm definitely okay with it. He should just get peppered. The one thing I love about Terry McLaurin, JT, is kind of game script independent in the sense that if they're somehow up early on, because a lot have talked about this Kansas City team being overrated now, they've had a down start, but it's only early in the season. I think it's too early to call it, but I will say that if they get out early on, it could definitely be because of Scary Terry. If they get down, it should just mean even that much more for opportunities. So 77.5, I think, is a very nice number. It pairs nicely with your Heineke. That's one thing I think goes overlooked a little bit on PrizePicks. Correlate up your picks, especially in the tournament with the 7-11 bet, where you can put together some plays. Use him, use Heineke, like you mentioned, and then run it back with the Kansas City guy. Maybe you like Hardman, or maybe you like Darrell Williams and their numbers. Put it all together, and you've got yourself a mini stack. If just one thing happens right, and that game does what it's likely to do and shoots out, you've probably got yourself 3 winning picks alone just in that spot, and now you've only got to get 2 more right. The second one, I'm going to address something else first. I had a guy text me, or DM me, and I thought it was pretty funny, but he said, hey, every week you guys say you have a play you love and one you're not so confident in. Why don't you just pick 2 plays you're confident in? I said, no, it's not that. I said, it's a gut feeling. I said, I absolutely love my plays on paper. I think they hold a ton of value. That's why I'm giving them out to you. I think they're incredible. I love this second play. But what it is when I say I'm not as comfortable with it, it's just not as comfortable as the first one. I feel like I said with McLaurin, you can do no wrong. They win, or they're up somehow, or they're up somehow, or they win somehow, then I think he's good. If they're down, I think it's even better for him just to get peppered and get those yards in. This second pick, I just feel like it's too good to be true, only because, and I'll give you the pick. It's Josh Jacobs for Las Vegas. It's the over 50.5. Not going to get into all the Gruden stuff here, but I do just think the matter of the fact is the opportunity, what he's done against Denver in the past. Last year, it was 89 and 112 yards. Most will look at it and say, okay, he never goes over 50.5 yards, but that's the number I'm taking here. I think this is a spot to do it. Last week, he got a few more carries. He's obviously had some injury stuff going on coming into the last couple, but if you think about it, 50.5, he had 48 just last game. So I think definitely a chance he can do it here. Like I said, on paper, I feel like he could get 60 or 70, no problem, and it wouldn't surprise me. If he gets even more than that, it's a bonus. I just think it makes sense. And at 50.5, I'm going to take the value now on Thursday evening or Friday morning when you're listening to this and lock it in. What are your thoughts on my picks there, JT?
Yeah, I absolutely love the McLaurin pick, obviously, with me loving Taylor Heineke, liking this game a ton. And then I'll be honest with you, Josh Jacobs, I looked at. There's obviously a lot of things swirling around the Raiders. And this game could go one of two ways. They could channel that into a fantastic performance here against a Denver Bronco team that I think is overrated. Talked about the Chiefs and people thinking they're overrated. I think the Broncos are overrated here. And I actually like the play because of what you mentioned, the history against this Denver team. Derek Carr started the year off playing very well. We both liked Derek Carr last week. I think maybe that was a product of some of the distractions going on, that they had such a poor game against the Chicago Bears. I like it a lot as a bounce back spot, like those two picks, especially if the Raiders come out and they say, you know what, it's us against the world. Denver's definitely a beatable team.
It depends on what they can do. You said it. You nailed it there. Like I said, without getting into everything, the matter of the fact is if they come out and just say, look, it's over. We're moving on. We need to be a better football team. We need to come out and do our job. Josh Jacobs is extremely talented. Get him a few more carries. I think he can easily get there. I think that makes sense. And I think that game could have some good secondary stacks in it. And I think it's a good segue because we're going into DraftKings now, position by position. You can utilize some plays like that, right? You can have Josh Jacobs. You can have him across from a Fant or something like that, where you're just playing the two sides of it. Let's hope Jacobs does his job on the one side of the ball, and therefore Denver's down and needs to make a comeback, and they go through guys like Fant. So Sutton, someone like that. I think it just makes a lot of sense over on DraftKings. So if you guys haven't been with us before, it's pretty easy. Thanks for joining us, but we're going to go DraftKings position by position. We're going to pick our top two plays, maybe a bonus play or two here and there throughout. We usually talk about stack, strategy, things that we're applying to the slate as it pertains to where we're at right now. Again, we record this Thursday evenings after kickoff for the Thursday night football game. We get to record this, have some fun with it, and then go enjoy the second half, maybe a few brewskis, whatever you want to call them. But I think that's the key here, right? We're going to go into the stuff we know as of right now. There is some stuff that came out even just today. For example, Damian Williams for Chicago on the COVID-19 list. It means Khalil Herbert is now going to be swung into the mix. And man, he even got a bunch of carries last week and looked good. He looked good in preseason. I think he's a good play. We're not at running back yet, but just naming a few things I can think of off the top. You mentioned some guys earlier like Kyler, Hopkins, what's going on with them? Lamar mispractice. Don't think anything's going to be of any of it when we get down to the business on Sunday, but I do just want to bring it up off the top. But let's hop into quarterback, JT. Start it off with you over there. Give me your top two plays at quarterback over on DraftKings this week.
Yeah, I mentioned Heineke and his match against the Kansas City Chiefs and what quarterbacks have done against that team. They're giving up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks of any team in the league. Part of that is the pace at which they play and the pace at which they score. The opposing offense is on the field all the time because normally the Kansas City offense is rolling down the field and giving that opposing offense an opportunity to get right back on the field. But part of that is injuries, big injuries to the Kansas City defense, maybe some aging pieces in the Kansas City defense. So I like Taylor Heineke a lot here. And then you mentioned it, everybody's saying the Chiefs are overrated. A lot of people saying, even some of our guys that we trust, a guy that helped sit in for you just a few weeks ago, Bobby Gomes, talking about the two safeties. You drop two safeties on Mahomes, he can't handle it. Team's been doing it. I don't care what the Washington Redskins try and do to Patrick Mahomes this Sunday. He's going to be in a lot of my lineups. He's expensive at 8-3. Tyreek Hill did miss practice again on Wednesday. Not sure. I haven't seen the report today. Kelsey was back, though. Kelsey, we'll get to him at tight end. He's at his lowest price point of the season on DraftKings. So give me the two quarterbacks in that game. That's where I'm going to start in most of my lineups, is going to be Taylor Heineke or Patrick Mahomes.
Man, we don't chat much before this show, and I love to hear it, but I thought you could go this way. I knew once I saw the Heineke prop, I was like, I think this is going to happen. One thing I'll say, though, about that is with the Mahomes news, or the Mahomes pick, is that it's an interesting week because usually he's extremely difficult to stack because it's a conversation of, do I go Hill or do I go Kelsey, or both? Gets expensive, all these factors. If for whatever reason Hill is out, yes, it brings more guys into play. The Hardmans, the Darrell Williams at running back. What do they end up actually doing? But it makes him a little bit easier to stack. There's more knowns than unknowns. It makes it a little bit less difficult to go about it. So I do like that. I also like that you brought up Kelsey because it means when I get to tight end, I'll go first. So it's like I had the pick instead of you. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Thank you for the hint. My two guys a little bit off the board. I'm going to go with a couple other guys that we've definitely talked about in the past, the first one. So I'll start with Sam Darnold. I think the price point's right, 6,100. We're definitely looking for a bounce back here. But before last week, he was having himself some great games, rushing touchdowns, a lot of attempts. I think he's 35 plus attempts now on average across all 5 games, rushing for TDs, everything that we know at 6,100. I think it's extremely fair. And then also going back to some of the guys, you just think about it. We've talked about Robbie Anderson. We've talked about DJ Moore. We've talked about Terrace Marshall. We've talked about the guys that he's got on his squad that we can utilize. But what's nice about the other side is Minnesota. They've been getting beat up by quarterbacks. You just think about Kyler, Russ, some of the other guys that went hard against them. But it's tougher to stack. Now it's almost like the Mahomes situation with Cousins. You've got him. We know Thielen. We know Jefferson. Cook got into practice today. It's hard to stack up in the sense of it costs a lot. And even though you know who the guys are and where the volume's condensed to, it's tough to pick between those 3, and you're not going to put all 3 of them. So makes it a little more challenging. If you go the Darnold route, you only need to stack it with one guy. You can go between 1 and 2 of a guy like DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. Maybe it's finally Robbie Anderson week. Side note, we got Kyle Pitts week like I said we would last week. We knew that was coming, but it certainly did in the primetime slate. I'll let you chat about that in a second. It's your boys, but they're on a bye week this week. Thankfully, we don't have to go back there, but I'll go back to Robbie Anderson instead, and I like him in that stack, and then you can run it back with just one of those expensive guys. If Cook plays, take the risk. If not, I think it's very easy to go with just a Jefferson or a Thielen. You had Thielen last week. Maybe it's a bounce back for him, so really like that stack. I think it makes a lot of sense. And then the first time I'm talking about this guy, it's my favorite team, the Baltimore Ravens. One heck of a game on Monday night. What a comeback. But Lamar Jackson, I know I mentioned today, not at practice, probably just some rest, short week. It makes sense. I don't think there's anything to worry about there. But it kind of seems insane to chase that incredible Monday Night Football game, but it just showcased Lamar Jackson. He's just a running back. We hear this all the time. Well, when he didn't need to be a running back and he needed to turn it on, he most certainly did. I mean, he only showed up for 2.5, 3 quarters that game, brought them all the way back, and then got the job done in overtime for his squad. What a big, big win for team morale, momentum, everything they need with a team that's just much better on paper, I should say, than what they've actually performed like, but they have had some injuries and whatnot. So the one thing I will say, all of the Lamar Jackson's just a running back, I kind of hope he is just a running back this week, because against the Chargers last week, we watched Chubb and Hunt absolutely throttle them, just gouged them completely. So if Lamar wants to be a running back this week, by all means, go ahead. Get in there, man. Do your thing, because there's going to be a lot of points that he can put up here against this squad. They had a battle last week that they went into. Now they go up against the Ravens. Ravens coming off of a big win, but it's not like an emotional Super Bowl type win. It was just it's an emotional game because of the big comeback, but it's not like they should have won that game anyway. So it's not, I wouldn't think that they're going to be too down off of that. So I kind of like them here. I like Lamar Jackson, and you can just stack him with one guy if you want. Put him with the Hollywood or Andrews, and then run it back the other side. I don't know if you want to go Mike Williams again. That feels expensive, but Keenan Allen is the guy I really like. What are your thoughts here on the quarterback position? And by all means, if you want to get your Kyle Pitts conversation in, go ahead.
No, I mean, Kyle Pitts, the coming out party happened. It was across the pond. It was in England, and you called it right. And he just had a big game. I wish it would have come when Ridley was active. I wish it would have come as a product of Arthur Smith wanting to give him the ball instead of he absolutely had no choice but to give him the ball. But it happened. It happened. And your 2 quarterback picks, look, I have reservations about both of these guys. With Sam Darnold, started the season off hot. I watched that game because, as you know, I picked Robbie Anderson as one of my guys last week. I had Robbie in, 75% of lineups. And to see Darnold underthrowing him on those 2 long passes, I want to go back and look in the next couple of days and see if that was a product of Philadelphia's defensive line taking advantage of some of the weaknesses on Carolina's O-line. That could happen again. And so Darnold underthrowing Robbie, it gives me a little bit of pause, because if he can't get the deep ball downfield accurately, then it's never going to be Robbie Anderson week. So we'll see. I don't want to overreact, but that's the concern I have with them in a matchup where kind of a slow game, kind of a slow-paced game. So we'll see. On Lamar, you hit the nail on the head. My biggest concern here is you can't play any of these Baltimore running backs, and we saw what the Cleveland running backs did to this Los Angeles Chargers defense. So if Baltimore decides to try and slow the game down a little bit, maybe get those running backs more involved to keep Justin Herbert off the field, which if you're an NFL coach, one of the things you definitely want to do if you're playing the Chargers is keep Justin Herbert off the field. We've seen that the first 5 weeks of the season. Those are my only concerns there. Definitely Lamar is capable of having that big game, especially with his feet. And you're right. He could be part of that rushing attack.
Yeah, I feel good about those comments in the sense that I like what you said about the Ravens there. I think it would be Lamar that they'd utilize to sort of run those longer drives. But the benefit being, let's say he ends up getting 100 on the ground that way from that plan of attack. Herbert is just that good on the other side that if he starts putting up numbers and then Lamar really has to get it going in gear, we could see that. And man, boy, when those guys went into the hurry up offense last week on that Monday game, that was certainly something. I don't know why they don't do that more often. They were getting down the field in 4 or 5 plays and being able to get into a scoring spot there. So I think that could be interesting. The Darnold one, you're definitely right. I don't disagree. I think that just, take a second look at it. But I do think the thing about Darnold is you are also going to have that. It is still Sam Darnold we're talking about here. It is a boomer bust type of play at 6,100. I can eat up a little bit of that, but I think that's just a product of the consistency, right? Or inconsistency in his case, where you're not going to see it every game out of him. But at least if he's trying and the effort's there, I think there's going to be opportunity, and that's sort of what I'm banking on. But let's talk about running back. Give me your 1 and 2 at the running back position over on DraftKings.
So running back, I honestly think you can make a case for maybe 7 to 9 of these guys this week that have the upside, that are in decent spots. We got the news already about the Chicago Bears going to be putting in a guy who's probably going to be a chalky play on DraftKings. But I looked at the running back position before that news came out, and one of the guys that stands out to me is Joe Mixon. Samaj Perine is on the COVID-19 IR list. And with Mixon and the Bengals getting a matchup against the Detroit Lions, they haven't been able to stop anybody on the ground so far this season. Mixon at 6'4", I believe, on DraftKings is his price. And he did play. He split time with Perine last week, probably a product of them trying to keep him healthy and ease him back in. But I think he could see some workhorse type volume here against the Lions. I like him at this price a lot. You talked about Williams from Kansas City. He's a guy that I like as well. But I'm going to give you a sneaky running back that I think could really pay off this week. We've been talking about this Kansas City-Washington game. You mentioned it. Hey, what if Washington gets out in front? I really don't expect that to happen. I expect this to be a game where Kansas City is pissed off. They come in after that loss to Buffalo. Everyone's talking them down, regardless of whether Tyreek plays or not. Even more so maybe if Tyreek sits. And they're going to be ready to kick some ass, right? And I expect that on the Washington defense, they're going to be able to get up. This is the perfect setup for not Antonio Gibson, but J.D. McKissic. When J.D. McKissic has had his big games, it's been in chase scenarios. And I've been watching the Redskins games more often this season, probably because of the pace that they're playing at, the lack of defense. They had that game against the Falcons, and they'll actually split J.D. McKissic out in the slot. If they decide to split J.D. McKissic out in the slot, he could have a monster game here. Even if they don't do that as often, I do think it's a spot where at 4.8 on DraftKings, I'm going to take a bunch of shots with J.D. McKissic because he allows me to stack up that game nicely, gives me an under-owned piece, and gives me some upside pieces like a Cooks, like some of these other guys that we're going to talk about as we move on.
Yeah, I love that. And I like that you went off the board. Like you said, it's pretty obvious this week. A lot of people are talking about going back to Chubb or Hunt and going to Jonathan Taylor. A lot of the guys that had the big games last week. Herbert will obviously be a plug and play. I think that's one thing to look at now that Damian Williams is out. Herbert being a plug-in, you got to decide what you want to do with your flex spot over at DraftKings because you have to play a second running back. But if you're going so heavy on a guy like Herbert, if you choose to do so, then it's up to you. You got to think about, do you want to use more running back in the flex to get access to some of these guys? There is a lot of them this week. I've got no problem with using wide receivers in the flex. Not as high on tight ends usually, but this week there's even an opportunity for that when we talk about just this Washington and Kansas City game alone in itself with Kelsey and Seals Jones in that game. Seals Jones being more of a price play, a price relief, if you will. So I think we'll talk about that when we get there. But I like the McKissic call quite a bit. I think we still got to keep an eye on Mixon. I know there was some talks and mentions today. They're still unsure. Already some talks around Chris Evans possibly being the guy this week if Mixon can't go. So definitely want to keep your ears to the ground on that. But McKissic is super sneaky. And I think what people forget, DraftKings used to have a couple of years back, I'm talking now, but a $3,000 minimum price running back. And that's where we would find a guy like JD McKissic. Well, the floor now is 4,000. So while he is 4,800 and most of that's expensive for him, maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. I like what you said. Under-owned piece within a high total game like that, one where they should be down. I like McLaurin because he could be used if they get up early and then likely get down and have to come back again. We double down, but McKissic would be involved in that stance. And then don't forget, I believe it's a stress fracture for Gibson in his leg. I know they're still rocking him out there for 20 attempts, which seems insane to me because the only way to heal it is to rest it. But that's just another thing on top. I don't want to say added bonus at the expense of someone's injury, but just saying there is a possibility if something comes up short or slips up, that would be even more opportunity just on top of that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for a guy like JD McKissic this week. I'll get into mine. I actually went a little off the board as well, mainly in running back. Like you said, there's a bunch of guys you could name, but I'm just trying to be a little bit different this week. I went back and looked at this Green Bay Chicago matchup. Obviously, division rivals go back and forth, have plenty of games against each other. And surprisingly enough, Davante Adams, who I know will be extremely popular this week, and for good reason, the guy's getting almost 40% target share of his team. So I get it. But I went back and looked, and it's almost every game is just 7 for 108, 6 for 118. Like there's never any huge explosion from points. I also went back and looked almost 4 years now, and after a 40-point or even a 36-point and above game, he's never had a repeat effect of that. They've always went a different route or changed it up the next game, or for whatever reason, it just hasn't happened. I know we're not talking grand sample size, but that's not just the Green Bay-Chicago matchup I'm talking about. That's talking about on his entire seasons every year with Aaron Rodgers. So I will say that the guy I'm going to go to is Aaron Jones. I think he's primed for a big game here. I think there's a spot that he can go. It's sort of the opposite side. So where most are going to be playing Herbert, I kind of like that Aaron Jones could go under-owned on the other side. I think the most popular secondary stack on DraftKings this week, and this is a bold call on a Thursday evening, but just feels like it already, will be Herbert and Adams. It's the number one receiver that everyone wants to play after the huge explosion last week, still cheap enough for Green Bay. And it's the backup running back that's now thrust into the number one spot with pretty much nobody behind him, a guy named Nall, who no one's going to play. So Herbert is kind of the guy there, and you're going to just see this matchup set up for that. I think Jones is different. You can take a shot on the other side. I think he can have his opportunities, and you don't really have to run into much. There's A.J. Dillon there, but you just don't see it enough, and he's still getting opportunity on the ground. He's still getting targets through the air. So that's why I like Aaron Jones this week. I think he's priced just right, Best Buy pricing, not quite 8,000. You don't put the 8 in front of it, just 7,900. It's extremely fair. Get yourself a deal at just 7,900. So I do like Aaron Jones. The other guy is way off the board probably, but Devontae Booker in for Barkley. Don't love it because it is the Giants we're still talking about here. But one thing I will say, the Rams can give up some rush yards on the ground. If you look last week, the biggest thing for me, aside from the obvious opportunity and Barkley going down and just plug and play and whatever, is the red zone. They gave him 4 rush attempts and 2 targets, and he converted on a touchdown of each kind. Got himself a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown. So didn't get a passing touchdown. That would have been incredible. But yeah, the other 2 kinds he got. And I do think that's crazy because when you think about that going into this week, regardless of if they're down, up, whatever it might be, you got to think they at least get into the red zone a couple times. And I think that there's that trust there that they can say, look, hey, he can say, I came through for you guys both ways last week. Give me another shot. And if that happens at his price, he can easily get another 2 touchdowns. So I think he's a great play this week just to give at least in large fields, give him a little try out there. What are your thoughts on my picks at the running back position?
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to be playing Davante Adams after that outburst last week. It's just the way I play. And the field loves to go back to these guys. And the first couple of weeks in the season, it burned me because Cooper Kupp just kept doing it. And then finally the league caught on and said, hey, maybe we need to shadow this guy as well as put man-to-man coverage on him. And the league has been doing that with Davante Adams. And the other thing is it's a divisional matchup. So you know that these 2 teams know each other. Even as bad as Chicago's coaching has been, they've still said, hey, we can't let Davante Adams beat us. Now, the one concern I do have is even last week, you saw that Jones and Dillon were kind of splitting carries. Yeah. It wasn't a 50-50 certainly, but we'll see what happens there. As to your second guy, really interesting because I don't think anyone is going to touch the New York Giants in this matchup against the Rams. And it was something that Bobby Gomes, another thing that he talked about a few weeks ago, when it was Jones that was out for Tampa Bay. He said, hey, look at this guy, this other running back on this team. Well, Devontae Booker is probably going to be the RB1 on this New York Giant team, and they're going to have very few options available this week. So I don't hate that at all at the price. Certainly a large field play, but something that could definitely work out.
Yeah, definitely a large field play. I think one of the things too, and I didn't get to it, so call it a bonus play at the quarterback, but I think Stafford is another guy that you can go about this week. I don't know really where his ownership is. It's hard to gauge as of right now, but obviously people always like Kupp. They always like Woods. You always like Higbee, but you can't play them all, or most people don't. And one thing I will say is a lot of people are already going to be talking about Tony after the week he had last week. It looks like Shepard and Slayton will be back. Ingram is still in the mix. I think all of these pass catchers get not talked up, I won't say that, but get enough conversation around them where there's still people thinking that way. And like I said, I just like the situation for Booker. I think he can be used more than one way. He certainly was last week. Did himself pretty good for, put up a pretty good number for himself across those 3.5 quarters. And I think that's just one way you can go about it. So I do like that. You almost really hurt my feelings right there because you start off by saying, I'm definitely not going with Devontae. And then you went Adams. And so I thought you were going to say Booker right out of the gate. I was like, geez, he hates my plays this week. But we'll go to wide receiver. I'll start because I'm just going to click it over to you quick because Terry McLaurin, I'm not going off that. Talked about it during the PrizePicks segment. I think, like I said, the big thing why I said I'd rehash it here is because kind of like how you talked about Heineke and just quarterbacks in general against Kansas City going for 300. I mean, especially if he goes for 300, I think 100 of those are to Terry. So I like Scary Terry, F1, McLaurin F1, whatever you want to call him. I think it's great. And I think it's a spot that you can easily go to him here. And I know he won't be the most unique, but you can do something like think about some of these builds as we're talking through these plays, guys. You know, JT Hayes mentioned McKissick. You can build up a Heineke, McKissick, McLaurin, and then run it back with a Kelsey if you wanted, for example. And that's like a great little stack to start your lineups and then start plugging and playing some of the other guys you feel conviction around within your build. So I think that's a great way to go about it. The other guy, and I mentioned him a little bit, JT, when I talked about Lamar earlier, but if you're not chasing Devontae Adams, and I'm not either, I'm certainly not chasing Mike Williams. I know what he's been doing, having a much better season. I love this. I mean, we've been talking about Bobby Gomes this whole show. That was his call to start the season, was with Joe Brady going over there, utilizing his new big Mike, not Mike Thomas, who he was with at the Saints, but with Mike Williams. And that's kind of what he's been doing. He said, listen, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to put talent to good use. Mike Williams has always been seen as just like, oh, maybe he'll catch boom bust, maybe a bomb here and there. No, he's big. You need to use him in all facets of the game, and that's what they've been doing, and it's been working. But also, the DraftKings noticed as well, and they hiked his price, so he keeps going up and up and up. Keenan Allen is way down there, and this guy, to me, is a good run back option. If you look at him, he'll be a little bit popular because of that. He'll be used in cash games. I get it. But 10 targets per game, only 1 TD so far. So there's certainly going to be some opportunity there, and only 6,400. That price is just really cheap for a guy that you can count on to get those targets. Regardless of how game flow goes, he still gets the short routes. So I think if you look at it like that, he could get easily 10 catches. Right now, already this season, he's got games of 7, 8, and 9 catches. We're just waiting for that streak to continue and get into the 10 catch game, and this could certainly be it. So I like Keenan Allen. I like Terry McLaurin. They won't be extremely low owned or anything like that, but I think some of the other guys we've talked about with the quarterbacks who are on, Robbie Anderson, for example, that you can plug in and different ways to go about it, that you can get some of those under-owned options. What are your thoughts on this wide receiver position?
Yeah, all I feel right now is hatred for you for continuing to take my plays. I mean, first of all, I love McLaurin. I absolutely love that play. Keenan Allen, the thing about this play is he's 6.4 on DraftKings, lowest price point I remember him in several years. And I expect, just like I think the Bears are going to look to take away Devontae Adams, you cannot watch game film of the Chargers game last week and not say, we've got to do something about Mike Williams. So he's the deep threat here. He's the deep ball for Herbert. Allen is the guy who gets the volume and consistency and short passing. I think that's going to be there in spades for them this week. Keenan Allen was my second pick here. So I'll give a third one in addition to the Brandon Cooks play that I mentioned earlier. And we talked about him a little bit earlier, right? The volume has been moderate and there have been concerns about Baker Mayfield, but now they get a matchup with the Arizona Cardinals secondary and Odell Beckham Jr. down to just 5-1 on DraftKings. I think this is likely the week that we see the big game from Odell Beckham Jr. and I'm going to have a bunch of him at 5-1. I think it makes a lot of sense. I do expect that Kyler, and we'll see about Hopkins because he did miss today as well. And apparently there's an illness involved, so you never know how that's going to work out. If he does miss, then it opens up some options on the Arizona side of the ball. But I like OBJ at 5-1. And again, another receiver that's at the cheapest price point that we've seen him maybe since he was a rookie with the New York Giants.
I didn't look up OBJ yet. I will, just because I want to know. But I mentioned pre-show to you. It's crazy. I think he only has one 100-yard game with the Browns. That's crazy to me. But just going back, I want to look it up live as you had it here with Keenan Allen. Last time he was priced lower than this was week 8. It was of last year, obviously. 6,200. Went for nine catches for 67 yards and a touchdown. The week before that, so that was after this week. I don't know why they didn't change his price, but previous to that, week 7, 10 for 125, no touchdown, but almost 26 DraftKings points at the same 6,200. And then in week 3, they tried to make him 6,100. He went for 13, 132, and a touchdown for 34 DraftKings points. So a cheap Keenan Allen is certainly something that you may want to consider. So I'll definitely say that. If nothing else at the wide receiver position, while I look up the other, I will let you go first and steal the thunder on Kelsey. I was going to take it again, but I know you're a little sad that I stole some of your plays now. So by all means, kick us off with tight end and talk to us about Travis Kelsey this week. I'll add some additional after for sure.
I'm going to be magnanimous and leave Kelsey to you, and I'm going to talk about 2 of my other plays that I like at tight end. So I'll start with a guy who's been hot to start the season. Thought it would end against the New York Giants last week, but it just hasn't. This bond between Dak Prescott and Dalton Schultz, it seems it's unbreakable. And as they go into New England, we know, we've talked about this when we were talking about Brandon Cooks earlier. Bill Belichick is going to look to take away the top options. Who is that? I don't think he's going to focus on Dalton Schultz, Tambo. I think he's going to focus on Amari Cooper. I think he's going to focus on CeeDee Lamb. I think he's going to try and figure out a way, if they can, to throw the rhythm off, maybe stack the box and somehow slow down Ezekiel Elliott. I think it leaves Dalton Schultz open to have a big game here. He's priced up a little bit, 4.9K on DraftKings. Tight end's been doing pretty well, though, against the Patriots. In this game, the total's been creeping up. While we all pay attention to Kansas City, Washington, and I think we should, and the Chargers and the Ravens, and I think we should, this game here that when I first looked at this slate earlier in this week, I thought Dallas into New England, Dallas going to roll over them, not a big deal. Now, all of a sudden, the total's creeping up. It's not a large spread. I think it's still 2.5 or 3.5 where Dallas is favored. And I'm starting to come around a little more on some of the more predictable plays in this game. And I think Dalton Schultz is one of them. The second one that I'll say that I'm mildly interested in, Kelsey, like you, is going to be probably my top play. But in that same game, Ricky Seals-Jones got a bunch of targets in last week's game. He's just 3 flat. This is an offense, Washington, with Logan Thomas earlier in the year that liked to involve the tight end, that liked to get the tight end involved to take some of the heat off of Terry McLaurin, to take some of the heat off of Antonio Gibson. Those were their big 3 playmakers, and Ricky Seals-Jones seemed to have stepped right into that spot. And I think he is poised at 3.0 to be a tremendous play this week, depending on how your roster construction works out. If you wanted to go higher priced at wide receiver, running back maybe with McCaffrey coming back, though I'm not in love with that play. And then you want to play, let's say, Mahomes, or you want to play Kyler or Lamar Jackson, Ricky Seals-Jones slides in there very well. And if you wanted to go double tight end, you mentioned the flex on DraftKings, man, Kelsey, Seals-Jones, same game, just 10K.
Yeah, and it works too this week. And you said Dalton Schultz, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you stole one of mine anyway, which is funny. I was going to go into that, but I was getting wrapped up in this Odell Beckham. You're going to be blown away. No one else is giving you this, I promise you, digging in like this. Listen to this insanity. It's going to be a tangent, but you have to hear it. So the only other time he was cheaper this year was 5,300. It's the only game he got 9 targets or even close to that number, went 5 for 77. You go back to last season, there was only 2 games similar to this price, 5,800 and 5,600. Mind-blowing. The only 2 games where he actually got touchdowns. The first one at 5,800 was a 581 2 line. The game at 5,600 was a 474 one line. Before that, the previous year you go, only 2 times priced in the 5K range. 5,700, he gets 3 for 81 and a touchdown. 5,800, 4 for 41 and a touchdown. This guy gets a touchdown every time he's 5K. Here's the last part that will blow your mind for real. The only time he was ever priced below 5K before that, you have to go back 4 seasons to his original 3 price tags on DraftKings at 3,800, 5,000, and 4,800. And after that, he was 6,000 or higher forever. But listen to this. 4 for 34 and 2 touchdowns at 32 or at 3,800, 8 for 156 for 27 DraftKings points at 5,000, and then 7 for 108 at 4,800. So like $5,100 OBJ is the nuts, basically. Any thoughts on that? Because that's incredible.
Oh, I've got a bunch of thoughts on that because people call me insane. In fact, one of our other coordinators who I love over at Run Pure Sports, I'm not even going to mention his name. Because we already talked about Gomes too much. But I mentioned this during Major League Baseball season. I said, this guy, he's at a price point where I haven't seen him in forever. He's going to smash. And he came back and he said, what? They play according to their DraftKings salary? Yeah. Because the algorithm is from like next year. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. I'm glad you look at things this way because I always look at this. I say, wait a second, just like Keenan Allen. I'm like, Keenan Allen is 6'4". How can I not have him in every lineup? Why would you not play Keenan Allen at 6'4" or OBJ at 5'1" instead of Devontae Adams, who's going to be 30% owned, and he's going to do nothing near what he did last week? Tambo, I just fell in love, and
he cost $9,000 too. That's the other thing. We're talking about a guy at 5,100. I think you can use that $3,900 somewhere if you want to. You know what I mean?
There may be a couple of plays that you could use that on. Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe you can go up from that $4,000 running back to the $7,900 running back. Doesn't always work, but I just thought maybe that would be something we should talk about. Back to tight end, though. I love it. We'll get into it. The Kelce thing, it's obvious. He's one of the best plays on the slate. We know it. Again, talking about a guy who's priced lower than we're usually going to see him at. I'm not going in to that same rabbit hole deep dive right now, but I am going to look after because it looks like it's going to be very fruitful for us with the guys with Allen and OBJ. But Travis Kelce, first of all, tight end is not very good this week. The position in itself. I always talk about the quote-unquote onesie position. It's a spot where you just have to pick a tight end. There's no choice. You have to pick a tight end in your lineup. At running backs, yes, you have to pick them, 2 of them, and you have to decide on 3 wide receivers and flex. But, you know, with a quarterback at the onesie, you kind of are putting it together with a stack. Tight end makes it more difficult, so I think that matters. And then I think many will have Kelce within the Mahomes-Heineke stacks for good reason, obviously, because it stacks up well and makes sense. But I also think you can utilize them in a secondary stack. I think there's ways you can go about it. We just talked about it. For 10K, you've got you've got Kelce and Seals Jones, and then you're using a tight end in the flex, which isn't as common. You're using 2 guys from the game that, hey, we're watching this game live right now. We've already seen Ertz and OJ Howard tonight in the Thursday Night Football game get touchdowns back and forth. It can easily happen. It can definitely happen with these quarterbacks who trust their tight end. Big dudes, make catches, are powerful, can get into the end zone. I think that can make a lot of sense. And then the other thing I'll say about it is with a guy like Mahomes, he's expensive. So I'm not necessarily saying to save your OBJ versus Adams bucks to buy up from Heineke to Mahomes, because there is a situation where Kelce could go 110 and 1 for 30 DraftKings points, but it doesn't mean Mahomes did all the work. What if Darrell Williams has 2 touchdowns, Kelce does that stat line, and Mahomes wasn't involved in the rest of it at that high price tag? You could definitely use just Kelce on his own without Mahomes. So I thought I would bring that up as well. The other guy I had was Dalton Schultz. I just think you keep going back to him. Ever since we thought it was Jarwin week on the original Island game that they played, and it was not, and it ended up being Schultz week. Since then, it's been 6 catches in 4 of the 5 games. They're just using him. Dak seems to be very happy with him. Keeps going back to him. He keeps coming through. It's not huge touchdown opportunities and things like that, but just the amount of PPR points he's racking up is very solid for the price. And I think he makes a lot of sense. I also think, just of note late in the show, if you're still with us, I think that's a kind of sneaky spot you could go to too. There's quite a big total there in that Dallas New England game, and I don't think near as many people will go there as some of the other games. So I think Dalton Schultz makes for a good play as well. Let's go to defense though. Last week I think we were 1-1. We definitely both like the Patriots. You talked earlier about Davis Mills coming out and just putting up huge numbers. Not that anyone was going to go there, but the $4,900 D against the rookie quarterback for the Belichick spot that we like to play did not come through. But the Arizona Cardinals and the Minnesota Vikings most certainly did come through, and we talked about both of those. What are your thoughts on defense this week? Because I don't feel as good about it as last week, and it wasn't quite right last week, but at least I had more conviction.
Yeah, it was tough. And it's the first time in, I think, a long time where you've seen a Bill Belichick defense not be able to just simply run all over the rookie quarterback. So this week, it's interesting because after you get past the Rams at 4-7, you drop all the way down to the mid threes. And then I think there's just a bunch of these defenses that are in decent but not great spots. I think the Rams are okay. We'll see what happens with Daniel Jones. If Mike Glennon starts, I will likely be all over the Rams at 4-7 if I can fit them. And like we talked about, plenty of savings that you should be able to fit them. But they are on the road. It is a West Coast to East Coast game. So I don't know in the end how much I'll have of them. And the lower end, I looked at a couple of these things. Carson Wentz has been okay, had a decent game against the Ravens. They are coming off of a game where I expect a little bit of a letdown, a slower pace game here against the Texans. The Texans defense, just 2.2K on DraftKings. And then outside of that, I don't really see a lot. I don't see a lot that I love. I mean, you've got Denver and the Raiders in that Western Conference matchup there in Denver. Always like to take Denver's defense there, but there are some other things in that game where I'm just not sure if I'm going to get there. So I don't see a lot. Maybe you see something a little bit more than I do, but I think it's a week where I'm going to focus on building my best team from the quarterback through the flex position, and then whatever's left, I'm going to take the best choice there.
Yeah, love that call. You are stealing a lot of my stuff this week because what I was just going to say was that $3,900 we had from before. So you go Adams and you've got, let's say, Adams and Seals Jones. Well, $3,900 more on Seals Jones when you drop Adams down to Beckham gets you from Seals Jones $100 shy of Kelsey. But it's just to give you an example. If you think Adams can match, or it doesn't have to, like, this is what people sometimes forget too, JT. Point per dollar matters, meaning points within the $5,100 divided into it versus, so if Adams scores 30, but Beckham Jr. scores 25, you want Beckham Jr. likely because you use that money and that savings elsewhere. Because then if Kelsey smashes Ricky Seals Jones by 20 points, that's huge. You only lost 5 on the original swap, but you gained 20. You're up 15 overall. So that's kind of how you got to look at it within your lineups. And yes, you're $100 short in that example, but I was just going to say defense is most certainly a position this week where I'm fine just to say, okay, I don't get my $2,900 D. I'll pick a 28 or a 27 or whatever's down there that you can just sort of play whoever. I definitely don't have as much conviction. I will say this though. I think the Browns and Colts will both be pretty popular. They're both at home. They both are in good spots. You can pair up. It's mainly due to the running back DST correlation that I know so many people put together, and I do myself sometimes, but I just think Taylor with Indianapolis, you've got Chubb with Cleveland. I think people will do that a lot more this week than normal because we're down to 10 games. It's hard to pick your spots, and why not correlate it up? So I'm thinking some of the mid-range, JT. I'm thinking going back to the Vikings. I'm thinking the Cardinals, back to some of those teams that are still cheap enough that can put up the numbers. And then I even think, as much as we love that Washington side, I think other people will as well with that game. I think you could still play Chiefs defense. And I will say this, it was the Chiefs versus the Rams in the Mexico City game where they put up godly numbers. It was like 100 and something total points, 105, I believe was the final total between the two teams scoring. But defenses both scored like crazy in that game. And I'm not saying to play them against. I'm just saying, don't think it's a bad thing if you go that way and say, but I still think Washington's going to put up all these points. Maybe they do, but maybe your stack that works in differently puts up more, and then that defense still does something. Or play a Darrell Williams with the Chiefs D or something along those lines. So I could certainly get behind that. If you had to pick one right now, you're thinking it would be the Rams, or what are you thinking?
No, I don't think it's going to be the Rams. I definitely think it's going to be, like I said, one of these other defenses that's lower priced where, and you talked about it just now, point scoring doesn't matter. No one in the NFL doesn't score points. It almost never happens anymore where you get that 27 or 38-0 or 3 game. I think there's like 1 or 2 shutouts a season. So I want to target quarterbacks who might throw interceptions. So I think there's a bunch of spots there this week that we can look at the lower price point. And not a bad call on the Chiefs defense. I think they're pretty, they're lower priced than they normally are this week. And certainly Taylor Heineke can have a great game and still throw a pick six and still fumble one away or something like that. So definitely plenty of opportunity, especially in those high totals where no one's going to be playing those defenses.
Yeah, I liked your Rams call, though, like you said, if it's somehow Mike Glennon, because then I think that makes a lot more sense, but it is expensive for that. That's why I asked. But what I would say there, too, is like you said, again, guys, remember it's your portfolio of lineups, especially if you're playing 20 plus. I'm still going to play some Heineke, but I can play against him with defense in the other lineups that I don't have him. And it just sort of balances it some where if I've got 20 lineups of him and he goes off, I'm in good shape. But the other ones with the Kansas City D likely aren't having a ceiling, so they're down. But it goes both ways, and I still think it could make some sense. I always like leveraging up a little bit in that sense. Anything else for this slate that you want to talk about, JT?
No, the one last thing that I'll say, yes, on the Glennon. If Glennon starts, I'll try and find a way to get up to the Rams. You're right about that. The second thing is watch the injury reports, because the Kyler DeAndre Hopkins situation does have me concerned enough to where, we're recording this Thursday. Hopkins didn't practice today. They said Kyler was limited. Keep an eye on that, because depending on what happens there, then you're right. I mean, there could be some value opening up on the Arizona side, and you might be more interested in a Cleveland defense at home, especially if you've got Kyler limited without his best weapon. So definitely watch the injury reports this week. There's a lot out there. A lot of these veterans are just resting, but you won't know about the severity until the news starts breaking late tomorrow night into Saturday.
Yeah, and we've talked about it in the past, guys. JT, let them know where they can find you first, and I'll take us home. I'll talk about some other stuff.
Yeah, on Twitter at JT Hayes Jr. and then Run Pure Sports. We're there. You'll be doing the Off the Chalk show without me this week. I'll be heading up to Athens actually on Friday. I'm heading up to Athens. We're going to take in the number one ranked Georgia Bulldogs against Kentucky this week. My wife is a proud University of Georgia graduate, so I'm excited to see my second game up there, and we'll be staying up there through the weekend. So watch some NFL up there as well. But you'll be doing the Off the Chalk show on 8:45, bright and early on Sunday morning. That's where you can usually find us both.
Yeah, you bet. I love that show. I'm glad you're getting a weekend to enjoy it for yourselves, man. That's going to be awesome. You certainly deserve it. We'll miss you on that show. But I was going to say that tomorrow night we also do, we normally don't plug this one, but we do a news dump show on Friday night. It's completely free. You can check out it over on YouTube, Run Pure Sports, myself, Holden, and the guy we got to mention one more time, Bobby Gomes. He's on the show. So we're going to go through that. We do talk about all the news that's gone on as the week went on. Like you said, there's plenty to talk about, and we're just waiting on some of it to drop. That's the best time for it. We've got plenty of other shows over there. And then, of course, Sunday morning, the Off the Chalk show. Again, free show. The Morning Wood show that follows up from our show has Big T, Hoop 2410, and again, Holden. So there's lots of stuff over there that you can get for free. And then you can use the new promo code. Check it out on the Run Pure Sports Twitter, RPSNBA15. Get yourself 15% off your first month, and you can get it for life, locked in. So NBA's coming up. It's an absolute print fest over there for NBA as well. One price is for every sport. So certainly recommend you get on board with that. You guys know where to find me on Twitter at ToeTagAndTambo. Hit me up there if you have any questions. Other than that, thank you and good luck.